Welcome to the world of Rex. It is Mr. Marvel Rex here. So excited to be with each and every one of you to discuss the weekly energies from an astrological perspective for the week of May 13th to May 19th of 2024. I titled this week Answers. We love answers because we have many questions in this lifetime, but there are answers incoming this week. So before we dive into some juicy answers that are coming in, you can always support me as a content creator by rating this podcast, subscribing to it, sharing with your friends. We love sharing with friends. You can also book a reading with me. The link is in the show notes. And if you're feeling feisty, you can send me a cup of coffee via Venmo in LA. That's, $6 to $11, depending on your predilection. The Venmo is at Marvel-Rex. That's Marval-Rex. And that helps me as a content creator keep caffeinated while we do the astrology. So good. All right, let's dive into this week. We are in Taurus season. So, what does this mean archetypally? The sun is in Taurus. We are figuring out how we can create sustainability in our lives. There is big questions around security. Finances are emphasized with the sun in Taurus. We also have multiple other planets in Taurus that are all desiring the same thing. They want stability. They want finite and long-lasting answers. So that's what we're looking for. And there's incredible ingenuity available because Uranus, the god of breakthroughs, the god of ingenuity itself, is in Taurus. So we're going to start with Monday. What's going on Monday, May 13th? We have Mercury leaving his shadow grade in Aries. Ding, 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 ding. What this means is that Mercury is fully done with his long retrograde cycle. He's still in the sign of Aries, so we're still maybe talking or thinking about what we need and what we need in relationship to others. There can still be a lot of self-focused inner dialogue, external dialogue, all the ways we communicate can be very self-focused. But because Mercury is leaving shadow grade, aka leaving the full cycle of the degrees that he went down back over in April, we are now coming through with some aha moments, realizations. Right, that's what eclipse season meant. So you may want to think back between March 20th and now, May 13th, almost 2 months, basically, March, April, May. You want to think back, what identity shifts took place for me? How am I renegotiating myself, my selfhood? How am I renegotiating myself in relationship to my one-on-one contracts with other people? This can be business or romantic or friendships or familial. And what relationships did I have to let go of? And how am I maybe more individuated on this side of the Mercury shadow grade? So Mercury was actually helping us out, even though it doesn't always feel like that when Mercury's retrograde. But Mercury was helping us have a deeper thought process. That's what a retrograde does. It forces us to have a deeper thought process around the sign that it's occupying. In Aries, it is about each of our journeys towards individuation. The reason it is so important for us to focus at certain moments in the year on our individuation, Aries season every year, is because if we do not know ourselves, if we are not centered in ourself, we then have a much easier time enacting violence on ourselves and other people. And this creates a domino effect that does not help us heal as a collective. I'll say it in a positive way. Mercury going into retrograde and shadow grade, which is when he's in the shadow of his retrograde in Aries, helps us understand what we need on a deeper, more fundamental and feral, raw level so that we can then communicate to others, hey, this is who I authentically am. It's been a journey to reclaim that, but this is it. And I need you to see it. And I'm willing to even have conflict over that process of seeing and being seen. And then through the conflict, through the maturation that comes with navigating conflict, we can then be more ourselves. We are less inclined to enact violence on other people. I have seen this so clearly in my own life, right? The more that I'm coming from an honest and authentic place, the more that I've done the deep shadow work, the less I'm even like excited about drama or violence or like, even microaggressions. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. That's, that gets in the way of me being me. And that's the whole point of Mercury going backwards in the sky in Aries this year during eclipses. Woo! So, really trying to drive the point home when eclipses happen during a Mercury retrograde. So, Monday, May 13th, you may just want to check in with yourself sometime during the day and say, what did I learn from about March 20th till now? What has been the big takeaway in terms of my own individuation process? Am I being honest? Am I being honest in my core relationships? And this can be you and a boss, you and a coworker, you and, your business partner, you and your romantic partner. Am I being honest? And it's okay if you're like, oh, I don't know if I have been. As Mercury moves forward out of shadow grade, there's a lot more, practical energy coming in with Taurus that says, okay, now we actually have to implement, we have to execute. I love this about the fixed signs. Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius, these fixed signs are about executing. So the cardinal signs, Aries being one of them, is about initiating. And then the next sign to follow, Taurus, a fixed earth sign, is about executing the initiation. So like, okay, we lit the fire. What do we do with the fire? Taurus is like, we're going to cook some food and we're going to feed people, right? Aries sometimes is just like, I just lit the fire. Look how pretty it is. And it's like, what do we do with it? Right? Doesn't care. But Taurus is like, we're going to feed people. We're going to feed ourselves in Taurus. So there's a huge emphasis on like, I'm actually now going to execute the downloads I've had about my own individuation process, about who I am, now that I've had some time to really think about it in April. What we love about this is that this is a signature where things are starting to calm down. So Mercury leaving shadow grade, it's like there's less issues overall in terms of how we are trying to express ourselves. There should be less violent communication. I've seen a lot of violent communication over, especially when Mercury was retrograde in Aries. There should be less of that. There will be more of a calmness coming in. And then particularly when Mercury enters Taurus, there will be a lot more calm coming in. The same day, Monday, May 13th, the sun will also conjoin Uranus close to Jupiter, really big. They're also both sextiling Pisces, Neptune and Pisces. So this is really exciting, basically, and a loose sextile to Neptune and Pisces. This is good. This is exciting. I think this is a huge breakthrough. I love Sun conjunct Uranus. I do happen to have a bunch of planets that are ruled, modernly ruled by Uranus in Aquarius. So I love Uranus Sun conjunctions. Not everyone does, but I will say this. For the most part, this feels very supported to me. And what is Sun conjunct Uranus? Well, Sun conjunct Uranus is a moment of breakthrough. The Sun is illuminating Uranus's ingenuity. It's out of the box thinking. It's taking a risk or creating entropy in a situation that has grown too stagnant. The sextile to Neptune is saying, okay, there's something really great here. It's also, I think there's a loose sextile to Saturn happening here as well. Okay, the fantasy might actually work. There can be tangible with Uranus and the Sun in Taurus, there can be tangible finances or financial stability happening here, or tangible resources coming in because we took a risk or because we're having some sort of delusion, but maybe the delusion's working. I'm particularly thinking about artists here. So people who are artists, filmmakers, anyone who works in the creative fields, this can be a really big moment of like, oh, wow, I got a really awesome answer in terms of the delusion I've been holding on to that this was going to work, or the fantasy. Our fantasies can become reality in the whole month of May, but particularly this May 8th to about May 26th. Really, really juicy period. This week is extremely exciting because we are in the opening square to that new moon in Taurus. So last week we had a new moon in Taurus on the 8th of May. So you want to think back to that moment. On May 13th, the moon is in Leo, which means we are in the opening square. The moon is in a square or 90-degree position from where it was at the new moon. So Leo squares Taurus, and the moon is now in Leo, squaring that new moon that happened on May 8th. I know it's a little confusing for some people, but just when you hear opening square, it means opening action. We are taking some kind of action on Monday, Tuesday, around something that came about on May 8th. And maybe we've even been thinking about it since April 20th, because that was the Uranus Jupiter conjunction, which the sun is lighting up right now. The sun came in and was like, ding, ding, ding. whatever was going on around April 20th, we have to make some choices and changes and take action on this. It's very abundant, so it's not a bad thing. This is like something was seeding around April 20th, and now right around May 13th, 14th, we are getting inspired. And that can also be a Neptunian thing. Like I'm inspired. I feel taken by the muses to go and do this thing that's out of the box, Uranus, that is maybe a little chaotic, but there's a long-term vision for the creative chaos that I see here because it's Taurus. Taurus says I need it to be long-term and stable. So let's talk about how potent this moment is. And I want to flesh it out a little bit using the words of an incredible astrologer, one of my mentors, Stephen Forrest. Stephen Forrest is actually, he's written over a dozen astrological books. You can look him up. His last name is Forrest, Stephen Forrest. And he's one of the founders, actually, of evolutionary astrology, which is a branch of astrology that I synthesize into my practice with clients. He says here, and these are his words. He says, whenever two planets, so Uranus and Jupiter, come together, when they form a conjunction, even this week we have Sun and Uranus coming together, similar. I tend to think of it as a transitory meta planet. So basically, he says the two come together and you have this larger planet that all of a sudden forms. It's like a third being, a third body. It's almost like when two people come together and have a baby. The baby is this mix mash of the two people, right? They're sort of like this big, again, he calls it a transitory meta planet, and it synthesizes the two meanings of both planets. So he says, like, what he does is he starts to look at the commonalities or the common ground between the two planets when he's looking at the meta planet. With Jupiter and Uranus, the common ground, this is what Stephen says, is an orientation towards the future between Jupiter and Uranus. Makes a lot of sense. Jupiter's like expand, 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 which is always moving forward. And Uranus is like back to the future. Uranus is out of time. It's not even moving towards the future. Uranus is like, I'm coming back from the future with ideas. Again, quantum. So both of these planets are interested in moving forward or going towards the future, maybe from different angles, but they're definitely both going towards the future. Most astrologers would say this is good luck when Jupiter's involved. Stephen Forrest says, to have the good luck, it really helps to be looking for it. In other words, for each and every one of us to be imagining how tomorrow could be an even better day than today. That's what Stephen says is future orientation, which is Jupiter Uranus. The sun is activating Jupiter Uranus this week. This is why I'm talking about it. So what Stephen continues to say is with Uranus, we're talking about revolution, whether it's personal or public. People in Uranian times might menace their friends and families with the proclamation that starting today, things are going to be different around here. Tomorrow will be different than today. In other words, there's the future again. Jupiter tends towards optimism. So again, this is not Mars in Uranus, which is like big changes and it's going to be really nefarious. This is Jupiter. I think of him as Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. There's like, I'm happy to be here. And that's Jupiter. Jupiter says the future can be better. The future can actually be a lot more inclusive and expansive and freeing in a lot of ways. So he also writes here that this Jupiter Uranus meta planet is about claiming our right to be who we were actually born to be. I love that. It's like letting your freak flag fly and having networks and communities be like, yeah, that's awesome. Like, we want to see you for who you really are. So he basically says, put it all together. The meta planet spells a tomorrow that's better than today because it fits who I am, who I really am, rather than what I've been pressured and tricked into being. I'm going to say that one more time because this is really what the transitory meta planet is, Jupiter Uranus. Again, being activated this week. It spells a tomorrow that's better than today because it fits into who I really am rather than what I've been pressured and tricked into being. Now, I'm reading this and I'm like, great, Stephen. Also, I want to just frame for everybody, this is super scary stuff. This is us really pushing out of our comfort zones. And Taurus is the proverbial comfort zone of all the other signs. It is the one sign that's like, I just want to Netflix and chill. I want to do the thing that makes me feel good, and I know it makes me feel good until it starts to feel like a trap. Taurus will really dive deep into comfort zones and into behaviors and patterns that are self-soothing, but not always the next thing that needs to happen, the future that is better than today. So if you're experiencing cognitive dissonance or even, internal uh, pressure to change and you're scared, that's totally available right now in the sky. Like I see this happening for a lot of folks where they may feel like, I don't know if I'm ready to make this big change. 2024 is an entire year of this process, and it's really heating up this summer and winter for the my southern hemisphere people. But May through till the next set of eclipses, which are right around September, May through September is a really big period of time to dedicate some moments to understanding, okay, who am I really? And what have I been pressured and tricked into being? And how can I actually have optimism for a future me that I don't even know exists yet? Or like, it's not legible to me who that person is or how I'm going to fit into these communities or new communities, right? Because when one person changes, every interaction they have with every other friend in their life also changes, and adjustments will have to be made. So this is all up on the table. We're all going to be dealing with this collectively and individually. And so, you might want to know where Jupiter and Uranus have conjoined in your chart. If you don't know, you can book a reading with me and I will really talk you through a new 14-year cycle because they have 14-year cycles, these two planets. They're synodic cycles. And what we need to be focusing on, either in a session with me or just by yourself, is what is your personal definition of success, and what good fortune do you need to fantasize into? Like, this is the Neptune part. What do you need to like believe is going to happen, even if you're like, there's no evidence that this is going to happen? Uranus and Neptune both love this sort of fantastical, out of the box thinking, but it must be aligned with your ability to truly think for yourself, your ability to think outside the box. In other words, get that independent self knowledge right and then boldly act on it. That's the Jupiter Uranus formula for a true breakthrough. I'm going to say it one more time. Get that independent self knowledge right, then boldly act on it. If you're like, Marvel, that sounds great and beautiful, thank you, but how do I do that? You can always work with me one on one. I will work with your chart and the archetypal energies present, and we can really get you streamlined onto figuring out how to understand independent self-knowledge for you. That is my job. As an Aquarius stellium in the eighth house, like I am here to help people understand how they can think for themselves, not the pressure of social media, not the pressure of their parents or their upbringing or their friend groups, but really, what do they need to do for themselves so they can actually be better citizens for the entire world in a way that's truly Glissantien, Edouard Glissant, the philosopher, who says each and every one of us is a singular within a plural, and we need to own that singular. So this is a big part of the Jupiter-Uranus breakthrough that's available. I want to kind of walk through a few examples that Stephen Forrest gives us. They're beautiful. Again, this is his work. He gives us some examples of what it on the ground, what a Jupiter Uranus conjunction can do for someone. Example one, he says, imagined a beleaguered copy editor in Manhattan. So someone who's like behind a desk, they're copy editing other people's work, who's dreamed of having no more money worries. So he's always scraping by, barely making enough money to live in Manhattan, very expensive. Suddenly, Uranus fashion, he realizes that he's been paying too much for the money he already has. He downsizes his life, he moves to Uruguay and somewhere in Eastern Europe where he lives like a king. Okay. He not only thought bigger, Jupiter fashion, under the Uranian ray, he thought differently too. So he was like stuck in this city that he thought he had to be in, right? New York, doing this grind. And then he's like, you know what? F it. I'm going to sell this apartment or sell all the things I have, move to Uruguay or somewhere in Eastern Europe, and like, I'm going to live really good. And that's very Jupiter because Jupiter is also about travel and Uranus is an out of the box idea. So for some people, it's like flipping the script on their life in a very big way. Example number two, which I think is beautiful because Uranus rules astrologers. Here we go. Imagine a mother of three who's dreamed of becoming a professional astrologer. Wistfully, she has always believed that the only way she would get there would be to live in a big, hip metropolitan city with many clients like Los Angeles. And it's impossible for her because her family is based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Nervously, she offers to do a talk at a local bookstore, and boldly, in Jupiter's fashion, she puts some money into advertising her talk in Tulsa. A local newspaper reporter sees the ad and, out of a clear blue sky, contacts her and says, "Hey, I want to do an article on you." It appears in Tulsa World. Because of this article, 50 people show up to her talk, much to her surprise. After that, 10 of them sign up for consultations. An attendee gets excited and helps her make a YouTube channel. And then within the year, she's supporting herself as an astrologer, even though she's got kids and even though she's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That is Jupiter Uranus. Okay. Jupiter expands and Uranus is these lucky breaks. And again, they're coming together in a sign, Taurus, that's about long term stability and long term financial abundance. So there is something here that's very juicy. And again, the Jupiter Uranus, Stephen Forrest says the Jupiter Uranus conjunction falls on her midheaven, which is her career. So she starts a new career, not as a professional mom, but as a professional astrologer. So I thought those were two really beautiful examples. There's more. If you're interested, you can message me through the podcast and I can send you Stephen Forrest's examples. He's wonderful. He has a website. You can check him out. He's lovely. But the point here with these examples is taking the risk that you have a passion for. You're like, I have a passion for this. I want to be an astrologer, or I want to be an artist, or I want to do this, this, or this. All of the details in my life currently don't fully line up. Jupiter Uranus basically says, go towards that thing. Neptune coming in saying, that's the fantasy. Go towards that. Put yourself out there, think outside of the box, and watch synchronicity happen in real time. And yeah, it does sometimes mean taking a huge leap of faith. I would say talking if you're unsure, talking to an astrologer is actually lovely at this time because I can show you where this is happening and where you're needing to take a big step out of your comfort zone for synchronicity. The moon is in Leo while this is happening, so I just want to flag for everybody that this has a lot to do with your desires and passions on a very base level, and also your relationship to your inner child. And this is super important. I've talked about the inner child a lot on the podcast, but to sum it up in this moment, the need to leave the comfort zone can be dictated by how in touch you are with your inner child. So sometimes when we're not in touch with our inner child, we have a very hard time knowing what we really desire on a fundamental level and knowing that it's safe to take big risks. So if we're out of touch or dislocated from our inner child, and by that I mean like our ability to experience joy, our ability to experience spontaneity and deep presence, deep like physical, somatic, mental presence, it can be then very hard for us to know, oh, this is the leap I need to take and I'm going to be safe because God's got my back or the universe has my back or whatever words you want to use or my inner child has my back. That can be it too. So inner child healing is very important here. And if you also want to go deeper there, I do that work one-on-one with clients as well, the inner child healing. Okay. By Wednesday, the moon moves into Virgo, the librarian of the zodiac, moves out of Leo and is like, by midday PST, the moon moves into Virgo and starts to trine or form a 120-degree angle to all the Taurus planets. So this is great to get things done with a payoff. So moon in Virgo's like, what are all the details? We got to get it all together. We got to organize these books, organize my life, and then the Taurus planets say, yeah, and cha-ching. Here's some like payoff. Here's some tangible results from shoring up all the details. As this is all happening, we have a really big aspect that comes in, which is Mercury starts to square Pluto. It starts to enter the orb of the square. And by orb, I mean a 3-degree proximity between the 90-degree square between Mercury and Pluto. This is really big. It perfects exactly on Friday, May 17th. So Friday, May 17th, this is PST time. Mercury scores Pluto exactly. This is a really big moment this week. And otherwise, the week is actually very chill and I think very positive. Okay, right? Breakthroughs are coming in. I guess the way I would frame this week is like Monday through Thursday or Monday through Wednesday, truly. And then it starts to shift. But Monday through Wednesday, the Sun Uranus, the Jupiter Uranus is like, okay, we're making all these really big changes. We're shifting out of our comfort zone. It feels very empowering. We're doing a lot of healing. And then there's a reality check, but also maybe there's a ruffling. There's a ruffling of feathers that starts to come in as Mercury like basically bumps into Pluto. And anytime you hear me say a square to Pluto, you have to think, oh, okay, power dynamic, third party storyline, drama, intensity, potentially trauma coming up and out of the body, right? Pluto is bringing up all the taboo to be transformed. And taboo can be as simple as conflict, because in this society currently, we're still very conflict averse. It drives me crazy because I'm Spanish and like Spaniards not as conflict averse, but Americans tend to be. No, I don't want to speak for the whole world here, but Americans tend to be like, I don't want to have conflict. But there can be conflict that comes up during a Mercury square Pluto. All right. So Mercury is going to be in Taurus, squaring Pluto exactly on Friday, May 17th. Now, what is Mercury in Taurus? Mercury, this is similar to what happened to Venus. Remember a couple weeks ago, Venus bumped into Pluto and was like, "Oh my God, there's black mold at the bottom of my mansion," right? She was like, "I'm coming Oh no, I'm not coming home. There's black mold." Right? So you might want to think back to, I think it was the first week of, yeah, it was the first week of May. Venus bumped into Pluto in a square and she had a reality check moment where she's like, "I have to transform something about my relationships. I have to transform something about my money story." And here we have a resonant energy, okay? A resonant energy on May 17th, where Pluto, our mind, how we process, how we communicate, is getting a major transformative interaction with Pluto. Like, this is not easy. It's not an easy square. What is this? Well, okay, Taurus is really focused on the self, really focused on security, financial security, self-esteem. Taurus, this is Taurus stuff. So Mercury in Taurus is thinking and communicating around your self-esteem and safety. The square to Pluto and Aquarius is groups, friendships, and the systems, governmental systems that are really not wanting that. They're just like, F you. A square is like, this has to transform. We have to make a decision and it's got to transform. So, what this can look like, I'm going to give some very mundane apparitions of this, or like how this would manifest. On the ground is basically fights with friends. Very easy. You have some sort of baseline need or creature comfort, and your friend is like, or friend group is like, no, that's not going to work. Or here's some kind of conflict. We have to transform it. So, friend drama, very simple here. Maybe friend drama in a way where you're like, oh gosh, I may no longer be able to belong to this group. This may be really triggering to me, or I'm no longer in alignment with a group. Something has to transform. Or you have to speak up for your sense of security or your sense of self-esteem in a group or friendship dynamic. Systems and networks. So Aquarius does rule like governmental systems. It rules large bodies of people, the internet. There can be major transformation and conflict with those sorts of systems and individuals. Taurus does tend to rule the body. So we could see governmental action and political action being taken to control bodies on a more mundane or global level. I tend to think about Roe v. Wade was overturned during the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, and that Saturn was in Aquarius during that time. So we may see some Taurus to Aquarius stuff can often do with people's bodily autonomy and the government coming in and being like, nope, no bodily autonomy for you. So there can be that on the shadow side. The positive side is that maybe Mercury steps in and says, actually, we're going to fight for bodily autonomy. So there is a positive element here. It's not that Mercury's actually, I think who's in the superior position? I believe that Mercury's in the superior position here. So Mercury might be able to actually change some of these governmental things. I'm thinking about even the protests that are happening. I'm recording this a little early, but the protests that are happening on college campuses, all these kinds of ways that Mercury rules students and young people. So we can see a lot of change happening with systems based on young people speaking up and or entering into transformative conflict. The thing that you want to be careful about personally is that this square can lead to intense interactions with others that aren't necessarily necessary. Okay, they're not warranted. So you can get really extreme or even conspiracy theory-esque with this aspect. You can be like, oh, going from a moderate point of view to a very extreme or coercive point of view. You want to be really careful there. And I think the moment that you feel like you're trying to convince someone else or force someone to be convinced, I take a pause, step back, and ask like, where am I really at? Or if you find someone who's not aware of the astrology trying to convince you or force you to come to a certain conclusion, just set a boundary, take some space, and be like, that is what's happening this week. And it's really intense, and I don't want to deal with it. Or I'll deal with it later when the energy is not as active. Because again, these transits come and go. This transit will actually cool off by the weekend's a little not my fave. Next week, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, things start to cool down with the Mercury Pluto square. But again, just be careful. Again, Mercury rules words. So I would, when you know there's a square to Pluto, watch your words. Investigate the truth, but don't really try to like put it all out there right now. It's more of like it's very Scorpionic because Scorpio is the modern ruler is Pluto. So what do we do when Mercury is sort of having a Scorpionic, taking on a Scorpionic tone? We just do research. We become a detective. We dig under the surface, but not too deep, not too deep. All right. And you don't want to get lost down the rabbit hole. And then we can reassess the facts once this energy separates by early next week. The advice that I have written here is taking the high road by maintaining an open mind and not arguing for the sake of it can lead to a positive transformation of your intellect and communication style. All right. And then that leads us to the weekend, which is not so chill. It's not so chill. It's not the hardest week. I mean, May is so much easier than April, just overall. But Saturday, Sunday, May, 18th, 19th, we have the moon in Libra while Mars will conjoin the North Node in Aries. So moon opposite Mars, never easy. The moon does not like to interact with Mars, not even really for a conjunction. She's like, he's too messy for me. He's too mean. And I don't want to be around him. He's too mean. Mars in Aries is like, what do you mean I'm too mean? I'm going to fight you. Mars in Aries is a fighter, natural cage fighter, the archetypal like brass and brawn, like just like big boy warrior energy. And it's a supercharged Mars who's action oriented and doesn't care about relationships. And the moon is in Libra, the sign of relationships. So the moon is like, but what about the relationship? And Mars is like, not listening. He's not listening. And he's actually confronting her and saying, I actually need to individuate and I'm going to kind of steamroll you. So, what can happen on the weekend collectively for everybody is that there can be fated actions because the North Node, hungry head of the dragon, is there. He is fated. There's a fated element there. Fated actions, Mars, that F up relationships. I'm just like, they are screwing up relationships. There's an impulsive and ego driven move to sever relationships or sever parts of contracts in relationships. So if you think of a relationship as a formal contract, it's like going into a legal document and just like cut it. Mars is like burning out certain parts of the legal contract and being like, nope, we're not doing that anymore. I will say all of this is fated, FATED, because the North Node is here. So if you can really breathe deep over the weekend, and if someone confronts you, or if you feel ready to confront someone else, know that like, wow, the wheels of fate are turning. They are putting you on I would say, the proverbial wheel of fortune and spinning it. And whatever ends up happening with the relationships was meant to be moved. Do I think it'll be easy with an opposition from Mars? No. This is particularly intense if you are a cardinal sign, an Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. Where are they? Where's my brain? There's a little bit of a with Mars in the North Node. First off, I want to say this activates the eclipse that happened on April 8th. So this is a reactivation of the eclipse. There are times when planets will step over a degree that the eclipse happened and wake up a part of the storyline from that eclipse. So I want you to think back what was going on in my life between April 5th and April 10th, but particularly April 8th. Mars here says, I'm ready to take action on whatever was going down in April. And it can be like, I'm doing it by hell or high water. And there's a little bit of like, I will show them a style of action. Like, I'll show my enemies, I'll show my old relationships, my old friendships, my old lover. Like, there can be a little bit of a showboaty, like, I'll prove it to you. And there can be a violent tone because these are two malefics, the North Node and Mars. So fated combustions and things like auto imploding. Again, I would just be really mindful about not trying to burn the bridge down. I do think on a collective note, we will see that happening no matter what on a more societal level. And if you have someone in your life who's not aware of the astrology, who's just kind of going off, I would just create boundaries around that person and not hang out with them this weekend. Like, not a chill weekend to hang out with somebody or to have an intense conversation. It's classic divorce energy. Mars, oh my gosh, Mars and the North Node in Aries Libra axis is classic divorce. So, because these two signs, Aries Libra, rule myself and then myself in contract. When Mars is there with the North Node opposing the South Node, it's like, F you, done, don't really care. So if you're trying to sever a relationship, wow, this is a beautiful time to do it. But will it be without some sort of like big telenovela style blowout? Probably not. Like this looks a little bit like a blowout to me with Mars in the North Node. This is not amicable. This is we're severing, there was a fight, we're not talking for a while. Like it's that kind of energy. The other way to deal with it that's a little bit easier, like I said, is create space and then let go and let God. If you are ready to really end something with somebody in a safe way, maybe have a third party present. That's the Pluto energy here that's actually quite supportive in Aquarius is like have a third party or someone that you can work with that is more neutral in this situation. If relationships are just falling apart at this time, I want you to breathe in and be like, oh, yeah, okay, this is right on time because Mars is coming in and kind of finishing up the April eclipse storyline. Outside of like a relational drama, which I do think it will be for a vast majority of people, but outside of a relational drama, on a more intrapersonal level, so you and yourself, you and your relationship to yourself, Mars conjoining the North Node can illuminate destiny or illuminate a glimpse of what's about to be an advancement on your path. It can feel a little restless, like you're ready to really rocket ship there so you can get the taste of the future. This is true with Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, being the hero that's embarking on a new journey. But at this time, Mars can sometimes kick up karmic lessons. So maybe you like see something, you're like, oh, yeah, that's the future. But then a few other things happen in your external environment that either slow you down or there's a relationship that's slowing you down, very classic with the Libra South Node. But just know that anything that appears at this time at all is a karmic lesson. Mars is kicking up a karmic lesson. So just address it and be humble and be like, okay, the danger of Aries is always just too much ego. And many of the fire signs, it's just too much ego. So we need to slow it down and be like, okay, what is the karmic lesson here? And how can I truly focus my willpower and align with my higher goals? But maybe I do have to address this relationship first. How can I do that in a way that's from a beautiful and integrated position, which is like, I'm not going to be violent here. I'm not going to burn the bridge down just to get my way. I'm going to address this, but still individuate, still move forward on my path. It sounds easy, me saying it on the pod, right? It is a journey to get there, but a big part of it is just setting boundaries and communicating explicitly and with patience with yourself, patience with the other parties. Last thing I wrote here was this is more like the slaying of the dragon, right? A few weeks ago, I talked about Bilbo Baggins walking around Smog, like being like, I'm gonna buy myself time talking to the dragon so the dragon doesn't eat me. Mars on the North Node, very different. Mars on the North Node's like the dwarf king. I can't remember his name, but the dwarf king coming in and like trying to kill the dragon, basically. So we could have a moment where I do think does he kill Smog? I can't remember. But anyway, someone will tell me and be like, yeah, he killed Smog. But it is very much a slaying of the dragons and being like, okay, and by a slaying of the dragon, it's like this is the final block that's getting in the way of me individuating, and I need to move forward. But the slaying of a dragon doesn't mean you're slaying another person, proverbially here. It just means, okay, I need to move through this internalized block. And often it just is about communicating your authentic truth. Like I said at the top of the episode with Uranus and Jupiter, I'll go back. Actually, let me go back and read what Stephen Forrest says so beautifully. He says, this is it. This is the slaying of the dragon. We have to slay the dragon to get that independent self-knowledge right and then boldly act on it. Thank you, Stephen Forrest. That's it. We have to boldly act on our independent self-knowledge. We do have to face the dragons that might be getting in that way. All right. So that is the week ahead. Good luck, everybody. I know you've got it. I believe in you. If you need extra support, I am here. You can always book a reading with me and we can go in deep. I love each and every one of you, and I will talk to you next week on, yes, you got it, The World of Rex.